I'm learning like what I'm excited about, what gets me going, and what doesn't get me going at all. And that's putting water bottles inside of people. And knives. Hi everyone, my name is Jayla, and today I'm going to be proving to you that I do read books. I'm still a reader, and this is still a channel about reading them and talking about the books. So I have a wrap-up for you for the first time in a long time. I feel like I haven't done one since November. My last wrap-up was in November, but it was for October. So we're not going to go into all the books I've been reading since then because we don't really care. We don't need all that. But I have a January to March wrap up to do for you, and luckily reading is so hard to do that it's not going to be that many books. So I have about 12 books here, I think, to talk about that I've read in the first 3 months of 2022, and we're going to increase that number by a lot before the end of the year, but for now it's, 12 is a cute number. She's the lucky number, you know what I mean? I just want to say I did a really good job of getting dressed and grooming myself today because you cannot tell at all that I am sick and have been sick for the entire week. So the first book that I read in 2022 is really something that I deserve a medal for. It has been a feat to get to this checkpoint where I can say that I have finally read Strange the Dreamer by Laini Taylor, and the fact that I didn't immediately make a video saying that I read this book is probably a crime. Because it's been a long time coming. This was a 5-star read for me, and it makes me even more upset that this was a book that I put off reading for so many years, knowing that Daughter of Smoke and Bone is one of my favorite fantasy series that I've ever read in my life. So I don't know why I was hesitant to read this one, but I finally did it. Laini Taylor's writing is fantastic, and just her character building. Laszlo Strange is the character we follow in this book, and I just want my own Laszlo Strange. It's so hard to be me. Truly. It's truly so hard to be me. So as I said, this follows Laszlo Strange, who's an orphan, who's really book smart and just a complete nerd, and nobody wants him, and he kind of just like makes his own way in life. And because he's so smart and so dedicated, he ends up being a key asset in helping this long-lost city that everyone's forgotten the name of. There's a team of people, but Laszlo is kind of on this team, kind of not. And they're tasked with helping the city solve a problem. And the problem... Anyway, we don't gotta talk about it because you don't need to know that much going into it, but it's such a good book, and I'm smiling because it's been a long time since I've held it in my hands, and I've missed it, and I do need to reread this promptly because unfortunately, book 2 put a bad taste in my mouth. I also read Muse of Nightmares by Laini Taylor, and I think I gave this one 3 or 4 stars? I don't remember. Honestly, I know I gave it 4 stars because I would never dare to rate anything lower than 4 or 5 for a Laini Taylor book. But yeah, but I'm unbiased, clearly, obviously. But no, I didn't love this one as much. This book was still really good, but it suffers from the same thing that Laini Taylor's other series finale, Dreams of Gods and Monsters, suffers from, which is just so much stuff going on, and so the book becomes way longer than it needs to be, and it really draws out a plot that doesn't need to be drawn out, and you don't really care, and it introduces new characters that you didn't really care about, and you're just following these characters, and you're like, I didn't need all of this. We could have followed the same core group of people and had even kind of had the same resolution without having all these other people drawn into it. So that's definitely why this was knocked down a star, because it was so long and I just did not care about maybe a good 30% of what the story is. Maybe more, maybe less, I don't know, but it felt like too much. And so that's unfortunately why this one was not as good to me. But the writing was still fantastic. The world is still amazing, especially, like, obviously the new characters answered some of the questions that we had from the first book. So overall, such a great series. And we look so pretty together. Gorgeous, gorgeous girls. Anyways, I'm gonna put these down now. Another book I read was Scorpica by G.R. McAllister, and I really enjoyed this book. It's an epic fantasy book, all-female cast. It's essentially this world where it's a matriarchal society, and women are all queens. There's 5 queendoms. This is called the Five Queendoms Trilogy, and there will be a second and third book. First book came out in February. You should definitely go check it out because it's super unique. I've never really read anything like it, and I know that it's not going to get the hype that it deserves. So I'm here to do the justice for it. In this world where women rule, women stop having female children, and so there are no more girls for like 10 years or so, and it's kind of a problem. They're kind of just trying to figure out ways to keep living life without their most vital citizens. No shade to men, but you know, kind of true. With a world like this, the world building is bound to be super interesting, and I thought the writing was really strong and that the characters were all really interesting as well. I do think that it had a lot going on because there were so many characters to follow, but I'm not mad at it. So this was definitely a really enjoyable read. So if you like women, if you like epic fantasy, political intrigue, found family, there are a whole host of things going on in this book that you should definitely check out. Then we're going to throw back to one of the big books of 2020, which was Such a Fun Age by Kylie Reid. This book follows a black babysitter and a white mom, and essentially the black babysitter takes the white mom's child to the grocery store with her and is accused of kidnapping, and there's a whole thing about it. Someone records the interaction, and it never really goes anywhere, but it's a whole thing for that night. The black babysitter is really upset by the interaction, obviously, but she just wants to move past it, while the white mom, who finds out about it, is really just filled with guilt about it, and she just wants to make sure that, like, black babysitter knows, oh, I'm cool, like, I'm not like these other people, I can't believe they would do that to you, and it spirals into this whole thing. But it's also about so much more than that, and that's what I really liked about this book. Because obviously the race discussion was super interesting, and there are some twists in here that I wasn't expecting. But it also talks a lot about motherhood, it talks a lot about being, I guess, like you consider her a millennial worker bee and stuff like that. I just loved how it followed two women in very different places in life. I think I only gave it 4 stars because I read it mostly on audiobook and didn't feel like the ending I fully retained it enough. I don't want to give it 5 stars if I can't quite remember how it all goes down. So I need to reread this one for sure and get back to you. But I read this one for a book club that I'm a part of, and I remember someone texting me and they were just like, so that's it? Like, that's how it ends? Because they were mad at a choice that she made. And I don't know why they were mad at that. They sent like a really aggressive message. They were like, Malcolm X did this and Martin Luther King did that and someone else did this just for her to do this. And I was like, it's not that deep at all. And this was a weird message. Anyway, so I don't know what their problem with the ending was. Like, I thought it was fine, and I think she made the exact right choice. So I'm curious if anyone else has feelings about what Amira decided to do after, like, at the very end of the story, because I was shocked by this reaction that I got from one of my book club members. So let me know down in the comments, because what? So then I read a book, if we can call it a book, that completely wrecked my will to read, and that was Den of Vipers by K.A. Knight. This book was bad. That's all I have to say about it. You probably saw my reactions on our classic Cliterature reading sprints or cringy Cliterature reading sprints. No one knows what to call it. I have a name for it, but no one wants to use that name, so it's fine. But anyway, cringy book club, which is so lame. Come on, guys, we can do better. So we read this together on a live stream. Me, Sarah, Catherine, Christine and Mo, Amanda, you know the group. And it was bad. I don't know what else to say about it. It wasn't good. It was a bad book. I don't know how anyone could enjoy this filth, and I don't mean like I'm not a prude. I don't care if you do certain things to get off, that's fine. This book was poorly written. There was no plot. If there was a plot, it was completely poorly written, and the characters all sucked. None of them were complex. There was one character, Kenzo, you know, even though he had his problematic moments. He was my favorite of the 4 boys because he was the only one who didn't suck completely, and everyone else sucked completely. But they all have like issues and stuff that they're trying to work through, but they're not working through them. They're just the way that they are. And yeah, this was a bad book. And that's all I have to say about it. I was going to do a full review for this, but no one needs to spend that much energy on something that brought them so much, what is the opposite of joy? Sadness? It didn't make me sad, it just made me really upset that this was a thing that people read and enjoy. I think I don't like mafia romances, I think I don't like reverse harems, I think that I'm just learning that a lot of these things that you girlies like are not for me. And I'm not saying that everyone likes this book. There are plenty of people who said this book was not good. Like, I'm not saying that at all. I'm not saying I have a hot take here at all. But some people do like this book. Oh, I need to not be as mean. So, okay. This book wasn't for me, and that's okay. And I know, like, as I'm wading through these reads with my friends, I'm learning, like, what I'm excited about, what gets me going, and what doesn't get me going at all. And that's putting water bottles inside of people. And knives. I don't like that. I'm okay. We're gonna move on and we're gonna forget that I ever held this book in my hands. So that's how I kicked off my February, but then I read some good stuff after that, and that was The Winter's Curse and The Winter's Crime by Maruta Katsuki. I've been rereading these books, as I've mentioned in my last few videos, and they're so good. Like, I just love them so much. When I first read these books, I definitely gave this one 5 stars. It's still 5 stars. When I read The Winter's Crime, the sequel, I gave this one still 5 stars, but I did not like this one. This is probably my least favorite book in the series. But now I can appreciate it so much more. My older brain, even though I've reread this at least 3 times now, as a 23-year-old, suddenly something clicked into place and I was like, maturity? Is that you? I can see it. I understand why all this lying is happening. I understand why they can't just be together. I understand that it can't be that easy and that you can't always tell people the truth because you are protecting them, which is obviously something that I understood going, like, reading it for the last 3 times, but it just frustrated me because all I wanted romance. I wanted them to kiss. I just wanted them to kiss each other, but they couldn't do that because they were always mad at each other because they didn't know the truth. And now I can appreciate so much more the levels of intrigue that are woven into the story and how every move counts, every little detail counts, and if you're gonna, like, even give away one tiny thing to your opponent who's not really your opponent, they just don't know that you're not their opponent, it could all come crumbling down. So if that doesn't make you want to read this book, come on, like, read these books. You don't understand. You can always count on Marie and you can always count on Lainey to make me babble like an idiot and smile too much. Unfortunately, I cannot say the same for Shallow Waters by Anita Kopax, which is the book that I read for Noelle's Hot Girl Book Club, and I was able to guest co-host for that show, which was really, really fun. Loved talking to Noelle about this book. Reading this book, I did not like reading this book, but it was not good. It was not that good, I should say. It's nowhere near Den of Vipers levels. It's not a bad book, but I feel like this was a book that lacked a lot of editing. It lacked thorough plotting out, and yeah, I don't know. It just didn't work for me personally. I gave this 2 stars. This follows a Yoruba deity named Yemaya, who's kind of like an all-powerful one. I feel like she's kind of known as the creator, maybe, but I don't want to speak too much on something I know nothing about. So it follows her, and she's a mermaid, and she ends up following a slave ship all the way to the Americas and being put through some really horrible things as she encounters slavery. For a book that's handling some pretty rough stuff, this book was kind of silly to me. As you can see, it's very short, but this book packs a lot into these very few pages, and that's what made it a bit surreal. It's just her, over the days and weeks and months, just meeting random historical, not random, all very intentional historical figures like Harriet Tubman and Ralph Waldo Emerson and some abolitionists whose names are escaping me, but it's just her and them moving up through the world and using her mermaid powers to do things. I would say that this book is too fast-paced and that there were no stakes in it whatsoever because all of her powers helped everything happen. I talked about this a little more extensively with Noelle on her channel if you want to go check out that live show, and it was a really fun time. We learned a lot about anal fins and such. Then I read this book, Credence by Penelope Douglas, and I am not here to judge my friends. I just don't think for me it is good. It is not bad. It was better written than I expected. I think that the writing is very strong in this book. And I think that this is not like, unlike in Den of Vipers, where I wanted to fight the main character, Tiernan, I could hang out with her. I mean, she makes some dumb choices, but, you know, I could grab a beer with her, and that's fine. Mostly my problem with this book is the men. They suck. They're all bad. This follows a girl named Tiernan, and she is 17 years old. Her parents have just died, and so she goes to live with her uncle Jake. Okay, so Uncle Jake is taking care of her, and he lives with his 2 sons, Noah and blank, because I've forgotten his name. What is this man's name? Jake, Noah, Wolf, Ryder, Caleb. His name is Caleb. Tiernan does not know these people. Jake is like her father's half-brother, so there's no blood relation between any of them, and they've never even met. But she goes to live with them, and she sees that Jake is struggling with his relationship with his sons, and like all of them just need someone to talk to. And Tiernan ends up being that person and really changing things up in the house. And you know, that's all well and good until it gets sexual, and that's when you lose me. I wasn't comfortable with many things about this story, specifically all the men being gross and not great, but also the fact that she was not really legal when all this stuff started happening. Like, it doesn't really cross the line until she's 18, but it doesn't matter because the lines were crossed, in my opinion. And I mean, in the law's opinion also, I would say. I think I enjoyed some of the steam. That's not really the problem. It's just the people that I'm supposed to be rooting for. I can't really get behind it. This was maybe a 2.5 star for me. Again, I thought the writing was decent. I thought that as far as like the actual story where Tiernan is someone who is coming from a loveless home and being like brought into what a family I was about to say what a family is supposed to be. This is not what a family is supposed to be, but coming from somewhere where no one would talk to her and she was felt invisible to somewhere where everyone wanted to fuck her and saw her, I guess that's good. I guess that's healthy for her. What was my point? I think I was trying to give this book a compliment. I saw Tiernan's growth as a character, which I personally really enjoyed reading about, and I thought I did a great job of her character arc. Everything else, not a fan. Other than that, other than everything, this should have been a werewolf romance. And I'm upset that it wasn't a werewolf romance because you got people sniffing each other. We got people disappearing into the woods for weeks. We got all this stuff happening. And yet, there are no werewolves in the story. And it just doesn't, it baffles the mind. It really does. So that was Credence. As you can see, I'm having a great time with the Classic Cliterature Book Club. We're reading nothing but bangers over there. So you should definitely join in and pick up a copy of After, which we're reading at this time. And I just know that's going to be a hoot. I also read No Exit by Taylor Adams, and I really, really enjoyed this book. I read it only on audiobook. I don't have a physical copy. I don't think my opinions of it are perfectly thought out because I wasn't really able to sit with the story and fully absorb myself into it. But I thought the audiobook was fantastic and was a great way to experience the story because it felt like a movie, even though I have not watched the movie yet, but I plan to. I did read this for the book club that Mo and Christine do on their channel, the like movie book club, but I missed the movie part of the movie book club. Oh well, I'll watch it eventually. Follows a college student named Darby who is headed home to see her dying mother while a snowstorm is happening, and she ends up getting like snowed off the road and she has to go hang out at a rest area for the entire night. And at the rest area there's a couple characters, and she realizes in one of their cars there's a girl, and a girl who's got duct tape over her mouth and she's tied up, and so it's definitely a kidnapping situation. And so now she's trying to figure out who has kidnapped this little girl and how she can save this little girl before the night is over, because she knows that they're not going to make it through the night if they stay there. I really enjoy being in Darby's head. She's got a lot going on, especially with her relationship with her mother happening in the background to all the drama happening at the rest area. I will say that the thing I didn't like about this book was the pacing. It was all over the place. I was shocked by how quickly we were kind of getting through the checkpoints of a thriller, if you will. And so that kind of made me feel like the story was a little prolonged because it could have been over already. But other than that, it also added to the suspense because I was like, what could possibly happen next? We're already doing X, Y, and Z. So I really enjoyed it. Also, I will say that I feel like the major plot twist really, really early on. So I was proud of myself for that, give myself a little pat on the back. Then I read The Poppy War for the Fantaseries book club, and this is so good. Like, one of the best books I could have ever read in my life. I definitely gave this 5 stars, but yeah, I really, really enjoyed this book. It follows a main character named Ren, who lives in also an orphan. Hey, so books about orphans are kind of just hitting, am I right? Like, Strange the Dreamer? Okay, anyways, an orphan named Ren wants to escape her home situation because she's going to be married off to some guy who does not care about her, and she knows that she's just in for a bad life if she stays in her situation. So she studies and eventually passes this test to be into a war academy. That's like this really prestigious one. She's brilliant, obviously, so she gets in, and then she is going through this academy, which is kind of what most of the book is about, and then eventually an actual war, which she is thrown into. And is she ready for it? Is she not ready for it? Is there something that will help her? I don't know. You have to read to find out. This book is beautifully written and beautiful in general, but there are definitely some ugly parts to the story, so you should look at the trigger warnings if you think that there's something that you might not be able to handle. War is not a beautiful thing, it's a very ugly thing, and there are some atrocities committed in this book. But overall, I really enjoyed reading this, and I'm so excited to continue with the rest of the series. And the last book I have to talk about for this wrap-up is Fevered Star by Rebecca Roanhorse, the long-awaited, highly anticipated sequel to Black Sun. I love this book. Of course, I was not expecting to not love it. I think I immediately slipped right back into Rebecca Roanhorse's amazing world that she's created. I can't tell you much about it because it is the sequel, but still the same characters who you know and love, or maybe you don't love. There's definitely someone testing my patience in this book, I will admit. I feel like this one was a slower read I know this was a slower read because it took me a long time to read it, but I mean in general this felt like a slower read because there's a lot more plotting, there's a lot more alliances being created. It's less about hand-to-hand combat or like getting from A to... Well, actually there's a lot of travel still, but that's also part of it. It's a lot of traveling, and I think that's what really makes it a slower read. So if you're not really into plotting and like alliance building, intrigue, this is definitely political intrigue at its fullest, then you're probably not going to enjoy this one as much. Or maybe just this series in general, because Black Sun also had a lot of political intrigue in it. But yeah, this had a surprising ending. Like, what was that ending? And also, when are we gonna go to the place that I want us to go to, speaking of travel? But yeah, this book was still so good, and the characters are coming into their own and learning more about themselves, which is really exciting to see, and learning more about each other and how they fit into each other's plans, which is also really anxiety-inducing to see. 5 stars, duh. And this one comes out April 19th, so if you haven't pre-ordered your copy, you need to go ahead and pre-order your copy, okay? Thank you. Okay. 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 So that's everything that I read in the months of January to March. Thank you so much for watching this video. Have you read any of these? You better have read Trade to the Dreamer, and you better have read The Poppy War, because those were definitely my highlights of the last 3 months. If you have any comments about anything that I read in the last few months, let me know down below. Like this video if you enjoyed it, and subscribe to my channel to see more from me. I'm done talking, I think. Thanks so much for watching this video, and I will talk to you in another one soon. Goodbye.